As entrepreneurs, there's a reason why we decided to leave our 9 to 5 for an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. I'm here to tell the stories of why we all hustle and grind for our companies. On today's podcast, I'm speaking with Bryan Trilli. So, Bryan, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really, really appreciate it. I know we've already had a really great conversation, before the show here. So, of course, it means this episode's going to be great. So, thank you so much for being on here today. I'm really looking forward to talking with you about marketing and AI and various other sundry things, whatever you come across.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andrew. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Anytime. So, we heard in your intro that you were in marketing space, and whenever I come across a guest who is in a space that's just so flooded, like marketing, you were saying and I was reading your LinkedIn where you basically said that there's just so many people out there doing marketing, air quotes, but not actually either with some sort of a system, or they're not doing it right, or they're just kind of saying they're a marketing person, but they're not really a marketing person. It's like, there are a lot of good examples of other people doing that. What is specific for you in marketing? Like, what's your niche? What are you really good at? And what sets you apart from, I want to say, the noise, like everything else in marketing?
So let me unpack the charlatan thing a little bit. I joke with people, only half jokingly, that um, marketers are below used car salesmen. No offense to used car salesmen, right? Like you
Yeah.
just don't really want to engage with marketers because there's so much hyperbole. There's so much over promising. There's people that just kind of throw up their sticker saying I'm a marketer and I can help you, and they're really good at maybe marketing themselves without having a deep understanding of what's going on. And so beyond that, the frustration I had as an entrepreneur who owned service businesses that we now service in marketing was that they didn't really understand either the business or any particular mediums, right? So whether it's digital or broadcast or whatever, it doesn't matter. Each of these is their own discipline. It's really complex to understand how they interact. And you would appreciate the lack of appreciation for psychology,
Yeah.
right? At its core, marketing is influencing people.
Yeah.
So Robert Cialdini, his book Influence, I think is a really great one to help you understand those factors that are lizard brain in a lot of ways, right? The basic things: credibility, authority, scarcity, urgency. And if you don't understand how that ties into a marketing message, or hey, how do we tell a story? You're huge on stories. I love how you do your interviews and get the stories out of people, because that's what people remember. We literally have episodic memories that tie into stories, right? And so all of this is part of marketing. And you talk to somebody that's like, oh, I've made some meta ads and I'm a marketer. Okay, but all of these other things, I mean, don't even get started on, well, what is branding and what a marketer's claim branding is and what is real branding. And there's a whole big difference and gap there. And what metrics do you use? Most of the metrics you're going to hear from marketers are just made up metrics, or they're not useful, whether it's gross rating points for television or whether it's impressions for display ads, or I mean, I could go down a whole bunch of them that they just throw at you that are like, these don't actually help me in a business. So what makes us unique is we test. If I go talk to a marketer and I say, hey, what's my plan? What are you going to do with my budget and my money? They're going to say, hey, we're going to do this, and it's going to give you this results, and it's going to be amazing. Most of the people that come to us, we turn away because they have unrealistic expectations. They don't have a big enough budget, whatever that means in terms of, hey, I want you to get me a bunch of leads for $10 for this $10,000 service I'm selling. It's like, wait a second, let's do the math. A click for that topic alone is $20, and you think you're getting a lead for 10. Yeah, good luck. Right? Like that's just not realistic. And so doing the math and going and doing the research ahead of time and saying, hey, in your industry, what you're trying to do, here's a reasonable cost, and it's going to be $100, $150 to whatever the lead cost is. Does that make sense? Can you make that work? A lot of people can, a lot of them can't, but we'll know that real quickly. Oh man, $150, we're paying 200 right now. If you can get better than that, then we're going to work really well together. Okay, so that's stage one, really understanding, can you help somebody? Not just you have a pulse, I'm going to take you as a client. Because long term, that doesn't work out for either one of you. And that's, the other charlatans out of marketing. Most marketing companies are sales organizations. They're not actually marketing companies. Their goal is to sell you on the idea that they can do marketing for you, not to actually get the results for you. So then once you're engaged, you have a plan, you have a strategy. I use the word strategy loosely. Most agencies that I've seen don't actually have a strong strategy.
Hmm.
They say things like, hey, we want to keep you top of mind, or hey, we want to make sure we get this magic mix, whatever that is, of video and audio and whatever. But there isn't actual strategy behind it. So you have to have a strategy, and it has to be based in science and psychology. And then we execute. Well, testing to figure out what works
Mhm.
is huge at that level.
Mhm.
So what does that mean? We've run over 2,500 A/B split tests on websites for
Mhm.
local service businesses. That's our real core niche that we help out. So you have an idea, Andrew, and you say, hey, Bryan, I have this great testimonial. I think we need to put that on our website. And I think that's got to be front and center above the product and whatnot. I say, okay, well, that's good. That's social proof. So that would tie into the psychology there. Good idea, Andrew. But if we push that down, we then can't maybe be as clear on what the product is, or we have less room to put our unique value proposition. But I actually don't know. Your testimonial might be more important than those things.
Mhm.
Those third-party certifications that you have from Angie's List or Better Business Bureau or whatever, those are going to be pushed down below the fold too. But maybe the testimony is the thing.
Mhm.
Let's test it. So we test one version with your idea, one version with what we had already set up, and we see who's right.
Mhm.
And so you get really humble really quickly. Because the reality is, even though marketers promise you the world, 60% of the time, 50% of the time, they're wrong. Because we have these competing psychological principles at play.
Mhm.
And so if you could just stack authority and credibility and scarcity and urgency and all these things, one after the other, the order then that they come in and how prominent they are now becomes a discussion. There isn't a way to know that until we put it in front of your audience in your market with your competition. And what do you do that's different that you can get that answer?
Mhm.
So there might have been a long answer to your question,
Okay.
but does that make any sense? Is it
It
tracking?
did. It did make sense, and so definitely tracking on it. One of the biggest things that what an mentor of mine when I first was in business said to me, there are order takers and there are consultants. Consultants will sit back and go, you know what? I'm experts in their fields, and they work with you, but they know what they're doing, and so they kind of they work with you as a team versus order takers that is like, I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to do whatever you say or whatever you think is right, and
Right.
I'm, yeah, would you like a side of fries with that, and a couple of other things here and too. And so it sounds like you're really a consultant, and I personally, I like dealing with consultants more often because I like to have a minimum functional level of knowledge of every part of my business, but bluntly, marketing is not something I'm good at. So what I'm going to do is have a general idea of what's going on, just so that I can kind of, if somebody's BSing me, I'll know what's up. But then I'll pass it on to an expert. And what I want to hear from experts, I don't want experts always telling me, yes, I hired you, you're an expert. It's like, previous guest said, you don't buy a dog and bark for it. You're the expert. I'm hiring you to do that. And having an expert say, your idea is great and we'll test it out. That's fine. However, if you thought about this too, and it sounds like you're more of the consultant side of things and maybe pushing back on stuff because again, you're the expert for it. So that actually did make complete sense to me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and the only nuance I would say there is we're very systematized.
good.
So we're using AI, we're using technology. We've developed an entire tech stack of our own over the last 10, 12 years. And so there's a consultative, hey, have you considered this? And it's interesting. That's actually shot me in the foot quite a bit. The idea that I want to tell you the truth, not what you want to hear.
Yeah.
A lot of agencies, again, what is their job? To sell you on their marketing services, not to get you clients.
Yeah.
And so if you say, hey, I'll give you an example, 20 grand a month on a television campaign for my local business, and it's featuring my kids.
Mhm.
If you've seen any local car dealerships, right? Like this is a
Yeah.
thing. What do you think of that? If you tell that person that, you know what, I don't really think your kids are helping you sell more cars,
Mhm.
9 out of 10 times, they're not going to hire you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why? There's an emotional attachment to that.
Yeah.
Hey, my kids are there and so on. And so you have to be very careful because, okay, well, your other budget we can still help you with, or slowly over time, maybe we'll make inroads. Hey, that 20 grand, maybe we'll move it to 15 and see how that works and so on. And so that's a challenge as well, because being too honest with people who have an emotional attachment to whatever strategy they've been using. I've talked to people, I've been on the radio for 40 years. okay, I mean, a few things have changed in the last 40 years. Maybe we can talk about where else you can, and we'll take a very nuanced approach to, well, what's your cost per impression and how many, which frequency and what's your reach. And, reach is really more important than getting a 40x impression, which most radios, what they get you, you're better to get 3 times the reach and only get a 10x impression somewhere else.
Mhm.
Right. And so we do the analysis, we do the homework.
Mhm.
But if for 40 years I've had a relationship with this radio station and this person, um, it doesn't always work that we're more honest with people, that we're very direct in saying there might be a better option there. So that's the challenge, and that's kind of why we don't work with a lot of people that come to us, because there's got to be that synergy
Mhm.
and understanding that we're going to follow the data, and that might say something I did is wrong.
Mhm.
And if that's true, you're going to know it. And I'm going in saying like something we're going to do here of this annual plan or these 37 things we're going to try. I guarantee you is going to be wrong,
Mhm.
right? And anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you.
Mhm.
Nobody is that good at anything, let alone marketing.
Yeah.
So I think that really sets us apart, though, that we will be that transparent, work with people so they know. The way that I phrase this, look, whatever you know about marketing your business this year, you have a bunch of questions that you don't know. What's your best medium? What's your best ROI? What's really affecting people? What's helping them make their best decisions? You will have more answers to those questions a year from now than you've ever had before. And part of it is we're going to test some things that you're going to learn that didn't work out,
Mhm.
right? But that's the only way. There's really no other way to get those answers, right?
Yeah. Huh. But I love that consultative role. I mean, like you're saying, you don't take on everyone. There's some people that do want an order taker, and that's perfectly cool. It's like it's
Yep.
not an ideal client. Personally, I like to work with the people that are going to look at me as a consultant, because it's so much more fun. It's not, I'm not McDonald's. I don't want to just, hash that things out. I want to kind of be part of this process. I like building it. I'm an entrepreneur. I like building stuff. That's what we're good at. Yeah, awesome. So
Exactly.
I want to cycle back here for a second and kind of rewind a little, because I want to see, how did you get started in the marketing world? I mean, you have an engineering background. You're not actually the first engineer I've met who's gone into marketing, but which I think is an interesting kind of mix. How did you get started? Like, were you always? Let's even go back to the entrepreneurial thing. Have you always been an entrepreneur? Is this a newer thing?
No, I wouldn't
Take your
say
bets.
always. I went to school for mechanical engineering. I wanted to design cars, and I had a job, a co-op in that. So I worked in a big metal blanking plant where they just stamp out parts, and it was horribly boring. Um, and I had no help. Like they had never had an intern or co-op before,
Mhm.
and so that just didn't sit with me real well what was going on. And I looked at my engineer friends who all were either in the industry and they were doing very specific things. Like one of the people I was living with, I was renting a room from him. He was the engineer that designed throttle bodies for the Ford F-150 Harley Davidson edition.
Hmm.
I was like, man, that is super narrow. Like, it's really, really specific. I don't know that I would like that. And so about that time, a gentleman came to my school and gave a speech. His name was Stephen Dickerson, and I'm still in touch with him a bit. But he talked about some things that he did, and I'll give you the quick, like 30-second story. But essentially, he had a part that was failing in the braking system for vehicles,
Mhm.
and they had to figure out what to do about it. And they solved the problem, and the competitor called and was like, "We have the same problem, you know, we're hiring people away from you to solve the problem." Um, and they did, and they hired the people away, but the people did not disclose the issue. They still had to go buy scanning electron microscopes and spent all this money to themselves independently solve the problem. They didn't just give them the answer. And he was like, "Wait, what?" Like, like the initial reaction was like, "This is horrible. You guys are, shortcutting to some degree because you know where the path is going to take you, even though they're putting the investment." And then he like got off the phone and thought about it, and he was like, "Wait a sec, this is a breaking failure that's happening. It's only one in a million times,
Mhm.
but somebody's in a car, the brakes are going to potentially fail, and I'm going to protect my business market share at the risk of a failure like that."
Mhm.
Like they didn't just straight steal the stuff; they are putting in the hard work. Like I'm going to let it go.
Mhm.
And he had another story about how they knew that his plant was going to shut down 2 years ahead of time, and he decided to notify the entire staff 2 years ahead of time that there was nothing they could do. And 2 years later, all of them had jobs, all of them had retirement plans, whatever. And
Mhm.
to me, that was like, I just sat there listening to his stories and I was like, that's what I want to do. I can affect way more lives
Mhm.
as a leader in business than I can by designing parts and engineering. And so that was kind of so I was 19, 20 years old, like it was there, like, okay, now there's something. Now I'm in engineering school and I'm gonna get my engineering degree. And all my friends work for the big, automotive companies and tier one suppliers and stuff like that. So I'm not sure yet how to get there. So I actually worked for a software company, and that software company was worked with a bunch of small businesses around the U.S. So I traveled all over U.S., Canada, probably went to 100 small businesses, something like that.
Mhm.
And one day I was at one of the businesses in New Mexico. It was only the second time I was ever there, and the owner was like, "Hey, we should go take a ride up to Colorado." I'm like, well, "We got work to do." To me, that was like, well, wait a second, you're paying me good money to be here and work with your staff. And he's like showing me the mountains up in Durango, Colorado and stuff. And I'm like, dude, what is going on? This is super weird. And then at the end of the day, he's like, hey, you should come work with me. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Like, why would I want to do that? He's like, well, I'll make you an owner.
Uh,
I was like, oh, an owner. Okay. Tell me more about this. And so it worked out a deal where I bought out his partner, fully financed the purchase. I was 26. I didn't have any money, like, to do all that. And so then I became an owner and had my first seven-figure business. And I had this idea in my head from probably 5 years ago that
mhm.
ultimately I wanted to get into business.
Mhm.
But working with small businesses and being around them, I really enjoyed it. And just an opportunity came along. And I would credit that to uh, he knew that I knew what I was doing, even though I'd never done it before directly. So I
Mhm.
consulted with a bunch of businesses, helping them implement technology and things to improve their businesses. But I was also a young kid that nobody ever handed me a team. And so when I took over that business and I came in as the GM, that was the first time I ever had anybody working for me.
Mhm.
I'd never had a leadership role. I'd never been a manager. I'd never done anything anywhere. And that was an interesting learning experience to figure out how do you motivate people and how do you correct people or critique or give feedback. Like all of it I had to figure out on the fly.
Yeah. And I think that's a difficult part about becoming a leader to begin with is now you have to deal with people and you have to deal with that leadership. I've seen a lot of really good leaders that are also terrible managers. It's a skill set that's a little different and having to I know I got thrown to the wolves on that one too. I was the GM of a restaurant and club in Cleveland, a big club, and had this team of 40 under me. I'm like, I've never done this before. You know? You learn a lot quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, if I could go back 15 years and what I know now and have learned, like, teach myself, it would be a lot of things would be the same. Actually, I'll tell you what the core thing, which is still
Mhm.
100% true, is I cared about people and want the best for them.
Mhm.
And that's my clients, that's my team members. And how do you express that and how do you implement that? And that is a whole different discussion, but people know if you care,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And that doesn't mean everybody's going to work out,
Mhm.
because caring sometimes means, hey, like this isn't the place for you to succeed. This isn't the place for you to achieve your goals as an individual.
Mhm.
And when they know that you actually have a concern for them, not I signed your paycheck, you better show up on time and you better do your work. And like that sort of mindset, we'll call it the boomer mindset you run into quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, they react differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, they act differently. And I have a situation right now with a team member that I noticed their performance wasn't where it could be. They've been with me for a few years. We had
Mhm.
a meeting and I said, hey, uh, you got to figure out where you want to be. Like, if you want to be here, then I know you're capable of this and this, and we got to get back to that. How can I help you? But if you don't want to be here, then tell me that, and I'll help you transition. And he basically was like, yeah, I want to leave in 7 months.
Mhm.
I was like, okay, well, a 7 months notice is pretty darn good. Right? Like if you run a business and have a team and somebody's willing to tell you 7 months ahead of time that they're looking at this transition to the next stage of their life, like that is a phenomenal. Like who wouldn't want that, right?
Yeah.
But most people that work at companies and for leaders or owners are terrified of saying that. Why? Because they're afraid they're going to fire them, they're going to pull them out of the, whatever. They're going to do these things to them to get repercussions. But he knew I wouldn't do that. He knew I sincerely wanted what was best for him. And if it wasn't being part of my team that he knew that I would help him go to wherever it was.
Mhm.
And so that concern for people, I think, is the core of how you build a great team. That's what's allowed me to do a whole lot more beyond the startup phase, beyond, acquisitions and learning those things. And that's been true again since my first business to where I'm at now.
Mhm. Now, as far as and I think just to go to say that I think we see a lot of leaders like Gary Vee doing the same thing too, where it's, you get this following. So with keynotes, and what I'll do with them is try to build a tribe around people. So these are folks that you've helped and things like that. Build this tribe of just rabid evangelists who will go out and no matter what happens, they're going to tell you, "Hey, this person's great. This person's awesome. They've really helped my life," and stuff like that. And I think you can do that as well with employees. And I think
Sure.
again, we're starting to see that with like Gary Vee and people like that. That you at least my mindset on this is that as the leader of this organization, I am responsible for your well-being. I need to leave you in a better condition than I found you. And I think that's
Yep.
a very serious responsibility. And I think some leaders will not want to take that on because it's whatever term they want to use for it. But I think it's really necessary, because that's our duty as entrepreneurs is we're the ones that go out there, change the world. We're the ones that make things better. And so I think, for us, it's something that we need to do. We need to make sure that we can show people the light. Or, I want my employees to quit at some point because I want them to go on and start their own businesses and learn that they don't have to be in a 9 to 5 and go out and do your thing.
Yeah, and it's sad
So
because unfortunately, a lot of people, when you say Enron, they know exactly what that is,
yeah.
right? And if you talk about corporate America, that's a
Mhm.
pejorative,
Yes.
right? And so there is a responsibility for us as entrepreneurs to change that narrative for people to understand that that's not actually what, like I said, I've been to 100 small businesses. Like that's not normal, right? That's the exception to the rule. The majority of people are loving and kind and caring. And so the way that we summarize it now is, and I told you I'm an engineer, so this is something that came a long time for me to realize is our core value, and I think core values are really important in optimized marketing is love
Mhm.
and love and service. You
Mhm.
say, wait a sec, that's some sort of emotional hippie stuff, and it's not it at all.
Yeah.
Again, I'm an engineer, I'm a capitalist, but the core of love is I use St. Thomas Aquinas' definition, which is to will the good of another.
Mhm.
Right. So if you're a customer of mine, Andrew, I should will your good. I should want you to have something good.
Yeah.
And I don't, I'm not just here to get your money. I
Mhm.
should actually want you to succeed in whatever you're exchanging value with me for.
Yeah.
And if I don't, then there's a fundamental flaw. And the same is true for your team members. The same is true for your vendors. How do you
Mhm.
treat them?
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And so I actually think the love idea, and I hope you and everybody that's listening steals that and uses it in their own values, is the best summary of what we as entrepreneurs should be doing and should be living.
Yeah. Exactly. So we're getting towards the end of things, and I do want to hit a couple of extra things here. And the first thing I kind of would like to touch on is you have a new book, Soulless Intelligence. And so we'll have a link in the description so people can go and purchase it if they want to on Amazon. But tell us a little bit about your journey through this and what the book is about. There you go.
Shameless plug. Here we go.
Absolutely.
I think there's an entrepreneur story here too. So I run multiple companies, and we welcomed our fourth child last September. So I'm a busy guy.
Yeah.
I think I coached 7 sports teams for my kids in the
Oh,
last 12 months.
love it.
Um, so yeah, how do you write a book while you're doing all this other stuff? And that comes down to building a team. And again, a
Mhm.
team that knows that you care about them. And then, I mean, as you pointed out, then they care about you. And then they want to support you. And then they want to help you. And I mean, that's how human relationships work.
Mhm.
So I think that's a big part of it. The goal of the book is to help people understand what AI is and what AI isn't. And so we have a whole section in the appendix that goes through, I think it's 24, 25 myths about artificial intelligence,
Hmm.
things you'll hear. So probably the biggest one is you need to fear artificial intelligence because it's going to be like Skynet from Terminator. It's going to wake up and like want to end humanity. And there's a lot of philosophy, theology, and science that suggests that's not true. There's something unique about the human condition that is not intelligence based. It is autonomy based. It's the ability to have free will and choose different things. It's ability to, as entrepreneurs, take a setback and either say that's the end of the story or to choose to overcome it. to choose to get through it, to choose to find a solution and be creative. These types of things aren't now and will never be part of AI. And we're seeing this sort of battle of ideas play out in real time. So the muse for me writing the book was actually Ray Kurzweil, because he believes humans can be downloaded into machines. It's called
Yeah.
transhumanism. And so the book systematically goes through and says, here's the science that says that's not possible. Here's the philosophical background. Here's the theological background. Like, take whichever one or all three of those that you want. But he has huge gaps. And he's, I think, one of the main leaders in the AI tech bro space. All of the tech giants sort of defer to Ray. And again, I think Ray is brilliant. I think he has a lot of great ideas. He just takes this jump from technology to, I would call it, spirituality and philosophy, without doing the homework on those.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think so. Ray Kurzweil was like the OG Elon Musk. He came up with
Yeah.
so many new technologies. We don't hear about him a whole lot today, but back in the day, he revolutionized, how synthesizers work. I mean, he's right up there with Ray Moog. He did a lot of stuff for the blind. He came up with a device that will actually read books for the blind and read
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
And this was like in the late 80s, back when processor power was not what it is today.
He was in the 70s when he first started doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he was
Yeah.
way ahead.
He was the Elon Musk of his day, but I agree. I think that book was him kind of going out on a he's gotten to the point where he's made his money. He does his thing. He
Yeah.
does a lot in human longevity is his big thing right now.
Yep.
And so, if you ever seen the guy, he's in his 80s and he looks like he's 60. It's great. So he's got something going on there. But I think it was him kind of making this assumption and saying, let's just take this to a completely different level. And so I love the fact how you're kind of countering that, going, well, hey, have you ever thought about this side of things? And I really like that, because with AI, it's such a new thing. AI has been around for a while, but is becoming something huge. And I think that we
What's
need to
available to
have
the
some
average
dissenting
person, though.
stuff. Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
very high end AI is available to the common person. And
Exactly.
having somebody, I think these discussions, I think one of the things we don't know how to do very well as a society, and I think we need to learn how to do it, is to have discussions, to disagree with each other and remain cordial, remain professional, still remain friends afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
That dissension and those counterpoints are something that I think are really necessary, especially with newer technologies. So I'm happy to see you do that, and I think it'll be an interesting book. Again, if you guys really want to get to know more about it, there's going to be a link in the description. But as we're getting towards the end of things here, I do have one other question, because I like to segue like this. What is one book or podcast that you can give back to the audience that has had a major impact on your life?
So we'll go to the book, Billionaire in Training by Brad Sugars.
Yeah.
It was a significant book, so I bought that and read it, and a bunch of his other books, actually, right before I did my first acquisition. So the story I told you about, buying the company in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And since I don't have a business degree, don't come from a business background directly, it gave me the confidence to say, okay, this is something I can do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it didn't answer all my questions, and it didn't teach me how to negotiate with the insurance guy, or deal with people coming in late to work, or whatever. But it was like, okay, this is a viable way to build wealth, to achieve my goals personally and professionally, through acquisitions or through business ownership. And I think the confidence was really just, okay, this is a thing, and you can just somewhat systematize it like I would understand in the engineering world. Like, there's a
Mm-hmm.
process to evaluating the businesses and to running them and setting up your values and your core culture and just all of these things that just said, all right, yeah, I can figure this out.
Nice. Awesome. I love hearing it, man. Thank you so much, Bryan, for being on the podcast today. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you for dropping a lot of wisdom and sharing what you know. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us on the Hustle and Grind podcast. If you'd like to learn more about Bryan, check out the link in the description.